Tonight, 12 days till the US election, and the candidates make a final sprint across battleground states. Kamala Harris sharpens her attacks on Donald Trump's fitness for office as he prepares the ground for accusations of election interference. We'll report from the swing state of Georgia and assess the narrowing paths to the White House. Plus, the reparations row brewing in the South Pacific, with Caribbean nations demanding the West pays for the legacy of slavery. Also coming up, an Al Jazeera journalist who Israel claims is a member of Hamas tells Sky News the accusations are false. And could the Menendez brothers soon walk free? A district attorney will announce his decision live in half an hour's time. That's all coming up on The World with me, Anna Botting. Hello, good evening and welcome to the programme. Well, we've been counting down to the US election this week, and tonight I want to focus on what could, for millions of Americans, be the worst-case scenario. Donald Trump has already lodged dozens of legal challenges, accusing officials of being willing to cheat the election result. Ready, many say, to claim electoral interference if Kamala Harris wins. You'll remember these images, hundreds of Trump supporters storming the Capitol in 2021 after he claimed the White House had been stolen from him. Well, a new poll this week suggests more than a quarter of Americans believe civil war could break out after November the 5th. And you can perhaps understand why. This time around, the race is exceptionally tight. In all the swing states, the leading candidate is ahead by less than 1 percentage point. It is why these days before the election have felt so frantic, why both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are focusing their attention on a handful of places, including Georgia, where Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen will make an appearance in a few hours' time. Let's begin the programme there then. Our US correspondent James Matthews has tonight's first report.
We are going to fly it like we stole it, try to get up as much time as we can.
To go to the heart of election trauma is to go to Georgia.
Next stop is ATL West parking.
It's the state that gave us the interference case, complete with Trump phone call.
I just want to find 11,780 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
And then it gave us the Trump mugshot and the prosecution for election fraud, currently paused. This year's vote was in the courts, long before it reached the polling stations. Legal challenges to the election process in Georgia and across America number more than 90. Republicans talk of restructuring a flawed system. Democrats call it a Trump effort to sow mistrust and chaos.
There are people like me who are not afraid to rock the boat.
Donald Trump calls Janelle King a pit bull for victory. She's on the Georgia State Election Board, which oversees voting. As a Republican, she's been involved in legal challenges that a judge threw out as illegal, unconstitutional and invalid. I suppose there are those who wouldn't share that view, that pit bull for victory. They would say pit bull for delay, disruption in the election process. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that that's all hypothetical, just like his statement is. I mean, there's nothing that would indicate that that will happen.
They are cheaters. That's the way they do.
That's true. They're professional thieves.
Cheating is the charge, already from Donald Trump.
Are for early voting.
If Trump is laying the ground for legal challenge, the man who once took his call asking for votes,
James Matthews from Sky News,
is asking for trust.
Are Donald Trump's comments helpful?
Well, doesn't faze me. I just continue to put my head down, do my job. And I think if people want to find out what's really going on, just ask Brad.
Republicans are making preparations for a lengthy legal battle in the wake of the election. Democrats, too, are wargaming likely scenarios, starting with Donald Trump claiming victory prematurely on election night. With one advocate for voters' rights, we talked uncertainty and the fear of it.
What bothers me more is there being put any iota of uncertainty in the mind of eligible voters as to whether or not they're allowed to vote. And that just should not be permitted to happen.
It is concern for the coming election, informed by the violence of the one just passed. In American politics, looking forward is difficult without looking back.
Well, James is in Atlanta, where that Democrat rally is being held in a few hours' time. The state, James, which knows only too well the perils of a close election. Any sense of nerves there amid the war games preparations that you outlined?
There absolutely are, Anna, and I think you heard some of them in my report, based on concerns around the vote and any attempt to try to litigate a route towards the presidency on the part of Donald Trump. The Republicans, they insist, look, there are problems with the process. That's why we have launched more than 90 challenges nationwide. But there is an opposing view shared by non-partisan groups who advocate voters' rights. They're saying that there's a real danger, not just after the election, but before it, that there are spurious complaints that delegitimize the process and diminish trust in the process, and that will disenfranchise the voter as a result. So there is all sorts of unhappiness, concern, and fears about where this all goes, not just in the run-up to the election, but beyond. And of course, I'm in Georgia at the James Halford Stadium. Harris due on stage in a couple of hours. It's tight here. This is the second tightest state. It was in 2020, just short of 12,000 votes was the difference between Biden and Trump. That's a small corner of this stadium. So you can see why there is a worry. You can see why Harris is deploying the big guns here tonight. We have seen her deploy the Stardust strategy with big showbiz names. The biggest of all probably comes tomorrow night. We have Beyonce on stage in Texas. Tonight here, we've got Bruce Springsteen, Samuel L. Jackson. We also have, Anna, political royalty. Barack Obama is going to be on stage for the first time with Harris. He has been campaigning for her, but he's on stage with her tonight. At the weekend, Michelle Obama will turn out. Democratic Party royalty lending political heft to a candidate who is seen to lack it. There is this problem that Harris has in unsticking the polls. Questions about her politics, ability to lead, ability to be a president. I think clearly what they're after is the image of the Obamas, that power, the image of the presidency to help bolster a candidate who has done well in the polls, is neck and neck, but struggling to go that extra small margins. The big guns being rolled out to target the small margins.
Yes, no doubt. Lots more from that rally a little later on Sky News. James, they're in Atlanta for us. Thank you. Well, as we build up to the election, we've been talking a lot about the swing states that will decide who wins the race to the White House. Over the next 10 days, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will keep going back to places like Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And we'll keep hearing too about particular counties. Well, Lewis Goodall, who co-hosts the News Agents podcast, will be analysing the results for us here at Sky News on election night. Here is his handy guide on the race to 270.
Election night on Sky News is going to be very, very exciting, not least because I've got this magic little box of tricks which will be able to help us understand what is happening on the night as it happens in real time. What is the state of the race at the moment? Well, we've talked about before about what matters in a US presidential election is, of course, the swing states. There are putting them in grey there, and we put how many different electoral college votes they're worth. Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. Between them, they're worth about 90 electoral college votes. Remember, you need 270 electoral college votes in order to win the election. This is where this presidential election, these 7 arenas will be decided. What do we know about the current state of the race in these places? Well, frankly, it is just very difficult to tell because the polling is so narrow. We have not had a presidential election that is this narrowly contested since 2004, arguably in modern history. In each of these states, every single one, the current leader is less than 1 percentage point in front of their opponent. It is a statistical rounding error at this point. But just for the sake of argument, let's take who is currently in the lead on the aggregate of those polls in each of these states just to see where it leaves us. So Nevada, Kamala Harris, narrowly in front. Arizona, a state that Joe Biden won for the first time for many years as a Democrat. Donald Trump is in front this time. Georgia, again, Donald Trump narrowly ahead in that state that Joe Biden won in 2020. Wisconsin, Kamala Harris is in front, and in Pennsylvania, again by an absolute hair's breadth in the Keystone State, Kamala Harris is ahead. Where does that leave us on this current map? Well, it leaves us with all that's left on the board, which is Michigan and North Carolina, two states where it's basically almost impossible to say on the basis of the current polling who is ahead. And you can see that in this scenario, albeit it is just one scenario, you can see that if Kamala Harris won Michigan but lost North Carolina, she would narrowly be ahead, and Donald Trump would have to win too. But to be honest, the point of this is to illustrate that there are different combinations, different paths for either candidate, and each of them is extremely important, which is why enormous amounts of money is being poured into each and every one of these places. If you are a resident of one of these places, quite frankly, in a sense, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, neither of them are leaving you alone right now. Let me give you another scenario, maybe a nightmare scenario for both candidates as well. Let's, for the sake of argument, say that Donald Trump wins in Nevada there, and let's see where we're at, 270 to 268. So not much of a difference at all. We're basically just moving over Donald Trump, Nevada, into Donald Trump's column. You can see on the basis of this result, Kamala Harris narrowly wins, but literally she's on the nose. She's on 270. And there's a particular peculiarity about this scenario, which is you can see here, this is the state of Nebraska. Not many people live there. It's a solidly Republican state, very agricultural, very few town centers or cities or anything like that. But you can see we've painted it in blue and red. That's not because we're undecided or a bit confused. It's about a peculiarity of the electoral system in Nebraska and Maine, for that matter. All 48 other states basically do a winner-takes-all system. If you get one more vote than your opponent in that state, then you take all of the Electoral College votes. So you get one more vote in California, you get all 54. Nebraska does it a bit differently, where they actually split their Electoral College votes. Basically, if you win in the district of one of the congressional districts of Nebraska, you basically win in the city of Omaha, then you basically take one of their Electoral College votes. So you can see that would make the difference in this scenario, because if Donald Trump were to win in Omaha, then there would be a tie, 269 apiece. What happens then? Well, then I'm afraid it goes to the House of Representatives, something that it hasn't happened since the early 19th century. What else can we do with this box of tricks? Well, it's going to be very exciting, because, of course, what really matters on the night isn't just about the swing states, which we talk about a lot, but frankly, it's the counties within those states. So we go back to the 2020 presidential election. How did Joe Biden win it? Well, we can look back at the data. He won by winning in counties like Maricopa County, which is the home of Phoenix, in Arizona. He won there by a difference of 45,000 votes. This is how you win a presidential election. You basically run up margins big enough in enough places, in basically places that most people will never have heard of, and just little by little, you eventually win the presidency. Other counties we're going to be keeping an eye on the night. Well, let's go to Georgia, for example. All of these counties here around Atlanta, key places for the Democrats, and if they've got any chance or hope of winning that state, they've got to run up the table in counties like DeKalb County there. These are all the Atlanta suburbs. Gwinnett County there again. Biden managed to just really get 58.4% of the vote, 72.6% of the vote in these big urban centers. Then there are the traditional swing counties as well. So we look at Pennsylvania here, Erie County, an absolutely classic bellwether county here. Think of it like Swindon or somewhere like that in the UK, that sort of constituency. It usually goes where the winning candidate is. And look, in 2020, Joe Biden carried it by a margin of 1,417 votes. One thing is absolutely certain. Whatever happens on the night, which is bound to be unpredictable, it is going to be very exciting.
Well, Lewis is with me. Goodness me. We'll come on to the prospect of a tie in a moment. But first of all, if the polling is all within the margin of error, then clearly we have absolutely no idea what might happen on election night.
No, and the good thing is, we've only got 10 days or so to wait. And in a way, that is one of the sort of frailties, isn't it, of the way these things are covered right now, which is, of course, we all want to know the result. But the truth is that not only do we not have long to wait, but we have got, in an election like this, which, as I was saying there, is basically the closest there's been since at least 2004, arguably in the modern American political history. The truth is that any one thing could change it, which is basically unforeseeable. I mean, there could be some bad weather in northwestern Pennsylvania, in Erie County, we're just seeing there, which prevents certain groups of voters going out, and that could make the difference. So in terms of the kind of soothsaying of it, it is very difficult. We've got lots of early data coming in already. I mean, this is the one thing that I think is really different these days in American politics, which is we talk about election day or election night. The truth is now, it's an election month. because early voting is now so common across so many different states. Republicans who had once not wanted or not encouraged their voters, as Donald Trump did in 2020 to do early voting, now are really encouraging their voters to do so. So we've got millions and millions of Americans voting already. And we can see data from that, but the truth is that even then, it's hard to really compare with, say, 2020, because, of course, what was happening in 2020, we had COVID. So there was so much more kind of absentee balloting and early voting and all those sorts of things. So the truth is, we've got to wait till election night to really have a good idea.
And in terms of those three Rust Belt states that you mentioned there, Kamala Harris ahead by less than 1% in all of them. Can she win without Pennsylvania, which has always been the question that's been put to the Democrats?
There are routes, there are paths that she could do it. If she won, for example, Georgia again, as Joe Biden did in 2020, and she won Arizona, and I think in those circumstances she'd have to win North Carolina, which is a state that Joe Biden didn't win in 2020. Barack Obama did in 2008, but no Democrat has since then. So really, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, it really, really is important. I mean, I think one of the things, though, to sort of note about that, and again, this is a difference between presidential election in the past. Go back to 2000, which everyone thinks of as the kind of quintessential close election race, which it was. Obviously, we know it was decided by like 600 votes in Florida in the end. You go back then and you talk about Karl Rove, the Bush election strategist, was talking about this the other day. You go back then and talk about battleground states. There were like 15 or 16 battleground states back then, including states now that we'd think of as completely safe, like New Hampshire or Oregon or wherever. Today, there are only 7. And this is part of a trend which has been taking place in American politics for cycle after cycle. As American politics has become more polarized, as more states have become safe, the number of actual swing states, the number of states that actually determine these elections have become fewer and fewer and fewer. And therefore, the paths to any candidate winning have become narrower and narrower. And that is why, as I was saying there, frankly, you wouldn't want to be living in Pennsylvania right now. You wouldn't want to be living in Wisconsin because you would not be being left alone. By comparison, if you're in Massachusetts or California or somewhere like that, frankly, you could pass the entire election by and not even get a leaflet.
Yes, it hasn't been that close in those 3 northern states since 1972. So that's why it's so interesting, isn't it? You'll have your box of tricks, as you described it, on election night.
Very fun.
And apart from Omaha, what should we be looking out for on the night?
Well, I think early on, we will be able to get a sense quite quickly, even from states which are safe. So someone like Florida. Florida counts the votes very, very quickly, partly because of the machines they use and so on. And although that is a safe state now, Florida is actually a really good microcosm of the United States because it has, it has all of the sort of ethnic minorities, it has urban, it has rural. And so we'll be able to very quickly be able to see, compared to 2020, and see how each of the candidates are doing. And one of the things I'll be looking out for in particular is this question, what Kamala Harris really needs to do. She has to try and keep as much of the 2020 coalition that Biden had as possible, which was a really, really, really diverse coalition. And when you're in a situation when someone like Donald Trump is doing as well as he does with non-college educated white voters, which are still 40% of the electorate, it means that basically a Democratic candidate, unless they can make inroads into those voters, which is difficult for them, it means that they have to basically clean up with African-American voters, Latino voters, and of course, white voters with a college degree. And quite early on election night, in places like Atlanta, as I was talking about there, we'll be able to see whether Kamala Harris is herself able to not only maintain that Biden coalition, but maybe expand on it as well. Because we talk a lot about the Trump coalition being particularly sticky for him, about him being able to motivate a particular coalition of voters, which we know is true. The bigger untested element to this election is whether Kamala Harris can do the same. And it is entirely possible that when we're talking about this in 10 days, 12 days, 14 days' time, that actually the story of the election is that Kamala Harris had an underestimated appeal to certain groups of voters that we can't know. Might not happen, but it is one of the big things I'll be looking out for on the night.
There's so much to look out for, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Lewis, good luck, and thank you very much indeed.
See you there.
Yeah, lots of data coming in for you. You are watching The World with me, Anna Botting, still to come. We'll give you a first glimpse at what you can expect from our special coverage on US election night. And another call for the UK to pay slavery reparations as Commonwealth leaders prepare to meet.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, the King will address the summit and in Samoa in a few hours' time. Is expected to show his willingness to discuss even the most challenging topics. Before his speech at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, he and the Queen have been given one of Samoa's highest accolades, a traditional tea ceremony. His Majesty swapped his usual suit for short sleeves and was honoured with a new title, as our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
Samoa calls itself the land of kings, and for a visiting king, the most revered of rituals, an Ava ceremony.
May God bless this Ava, La Manuia.
It is a rite reserved for special guests, and every sip of the ground root is sacred. And here a welcome at a neighbouring village, the king now honoured with a High Chief title.
His Majesty is now the King of Tamasina, and if he goes back to the British Isles, to Great Britain, he's part of us.
With Samoa in the spotlight hosting Commonwealth countries, this is a chance to highlight the plight of Pacific Islands. The climate crisis threatens their coastlines, but these restored mangrove forests are fighting back. And here on show, a display of village life. Traditions handed down, still the heart of Samoan society.
Samoa wants this visit to leave a lasting impression. And so for the King and Queen, a day of culture, customs and conversations. All a big celebration of this small island nation.
Samoa is not a very famous country, so yeah, that is why it is very nice and very awesome for them to come here to our country to learn more about our culture and our history.
It was an honor to meet the king and wave and like face to face. You can see him, like he can wave at us, smile. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet the King Charles.
A drenched day, but steeped with Samoan welcome. They've met the people.
1, 2, 3, Manu!
Tomorrow, the turn of politicians and the Commonwealth. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Samoa.
Well, the King and the Prime Minister would have preferred to avoid talk of slavery reparations at this year's Commonwealth Summit, but Caribbean leaders gathered in Samoa are calling for talks about the UK paying reparations for its historic role in the slave trade. Well, while the summit includes 55 Commonwealth leaders, a group of 15 Caribbean countries shown here have been leading the pressure on the UK government to formally own up to their prominent role in the slave trade. More than 12.5 million men, women and children were kidnapped in Africa and taken against their will on a perilous journey across the Atlantic and forced to work on plantations. A report published last year concluded that the UK owed more than £18 trillion to the Caribbean countries for its role in slavery. The Prime Minister has insisted he wants to look forward, not back. Reparations could also come by way of a formal apology or via debt relief or educational programmes. Those options have already been ruled out by the government. Well, joining us now is Eric Phillips, the Vice Chair of CARICOM's Slavery Reparations Commission and Chair of the Guyana Reparations Committee. Good to see you here. Watching closely, no doubt, what happens at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. Not on the agenda, according to the UK government, but you must be delighted that Caribbean nations are persisting in bringing it to the table there.
Yes, we've been at this for almost a decade. And we have written to all the European heads of states. I think this is an ideal opportunity for the King of England, the head of the Commonwealth, to address the issue. Of course, you know, the Commonwealth is because of slavery and colonialism. So he has an ideal opportunity now to discuss it, to sit down and to see how we can move forward, recognizing, of course, that even though the Prime Minister is speaking about climate change is a result of slavery and capitalism. Capitalism underpinned slavery, and capitalism is the reason why we're having climate crisis. So they're linked. You can't dissociate the two. So it's a great opportunity to discuss it, especially under the Commonwealth umbrella.
So what does reparation mean for you then? Does it simply mean a blank cheque?
No, absolutely not. We have a 10-point plan that begins with an apology. It speaks about Indigenous development program because Indigenous tribes are also impacted. It talks about health issues. It's really a development platform. We're not looking just for money's sake because we may not be able to absorb it. But we're looking for a comprehensive program that is developmental in nature, that has reciprocity so that the UK can also benefit through trade, fair trade that is. We're looking at the tremendous educational deficiencies we have, health issues. You know, Barbados is the amputation capital of the world because of diabetes, and this is directly linked to slavery. But we're also looking to cultural rehabilitation. We're looking at psychological rehabilitation. We're looking at debt relief. We're looking at technology transfer. There are many ways in which the UK can work with Caribbean nations.
Well, many of those have a budget to them, but there are many people, you know, in this country or elsewhere who say you're morally judging the UK at a time when things are materially different. You're making victims of people when there are no living survivors of slavery, which was abolished in 1807 in the British Empire.
Well, to be historically correct, 4,000 to 6,000 Britons received compensation from the £20 million. And that has sort of cascaded throughout the economy. It engendered the industrial age. So Britain has benefited dramatically. And even now you may be saying you can't afford it. You can, because there are many different ways in which you can. You look at your military budget. Look at money you have to
hold on,
spend for
where do you
climate change.
start and where do you end with this? I mean, human history is littered with nations being bad to other nations, peoples being bad to other peoples. Where do you go back to?
But this is a crime against humanity. A crime against humanity has no real end. I think that it's not just a moral issue, it's a development issue. It's an issue of morality. It's an issue of climate change. It's an issue of many other issues. For the Caribbean, this is an economic, psychological, health, medical, and cultural issue. And I think for the UK...
You heard Sir Keir Starmer. You heard Sir Keir Starmer say about the need to look forward. You know, only today, the UN Environment Programme talked about a catastrophic 2.8 degrees of warming by the end of this century. As you well know, for some island nations, it is existential, or it could be. You know, why not look forward to that rather than look back 200, 220 years?
But what's the cause of climate change? It began with slavery. It began with capitalism.
You might argue it began with the Industrial Revolution, not necessarily slavery.
Well, it began because slavery is what generated capitalism. And this rampant capitalism is what has destroyed the earth, what's created climate change. So they're linked. As much as he's saying, let's forget the past and look forward, the past is linked to the future. The past is linked to the present. And it all began with slavery and British colonialism. And I think it's a win-win. I think the PM is looking at it as a win-lose situation. And he's really looking at us with indifference. You can't want partnerships in the Commonwealth nations if you're looking at us with indifference. You have to look at us as partners. And part of being a partner is understanding our needs, understanding reciprocity, understanding how we can coexist, understand how we can develop together. Britain has left Europe, Brexit. It's looking for new trading partners. A lot of what Britain needs in terms of job creation, in terms of the future, lies in Commonwealth countries, lies in the Caribbean. So I think there is a win-win, and that's how the Prime Minister should look at it, and not in the context of it's the past and it's the future. At least you can apologize. There's nothing wrong with apologizing. The Dutch
Eric
Prime
Phillips.
Minister...
Apologies, we're running out of time. I do apologise for cutting you off there. You know, hard work for you, at it for a decade, more years ahead, no doubt. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
We're looking ahead to breaking news. The Los Angeles District Attorney is expected to announce his decision about whether the Menendez brothers should be serving life sentences for killing their parents in 1989. Relatives of Eric and Lyle Menendez have pleaded for the brothers' release following claims they had been sexually abused by their father. The scene is set back there straight after this break.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, let's take you straight back to images then from Los Angeles. We are expecting the district attorney there to announce a decision on whether to recommend resentencing in the case of the Menendez brothers. Both of them accused and found guilty of shooting dead their parents. They've been in prison for nearly 35 years. Their high-profile trials, one of the first cases to be televised, all brought back to public attention after a Netflix drama, a documentary as well. The brothers did not deny killing their parents, but argued they should not be convicted because they acted in self-defense after enduring a lifetime of abuse by their father. And last week, we saw their families outside the court in a united front pleading for the two brothers to be freed. They were 21 and 18 at the time. Lyle and Eric shot their parents, having planned it. They were arrested less than a year later in 1990 and accused of first-degree murder. As I said, more than 34 years, nearly 35 years in jail. Their families want them free. We'll take you to that when that happens. In the meantime, let us return to the US election now and what is, of course, an extremely tight race. Joining me now is Omarosa Manigault-Newman, former senior White House advisor under Donald Trump, who has now endorsed Kamala Harris. We had the pleasure of your company in 2020. Great to see you back again now. Such a close race. Have you ever seen one this close? And if so, what are the implications of it?
This is the closest race that I've ever seen, and I'm so glad to join you to talk about this because we really will not know who will win this election until maybe days after the election is closed.
Well, indeed so, and there might be legal challenges. But, you know, as we look through and think about election night, which states for you are absolutely critical?
Pennsylvania is the center of the political universe right now for this election. It will determine who will be the next president of the United States. Certainly, you can see by how many appearances each candidate is making in Pennsylvania how important it is to the race. I'm watching down to each county, each district, each precinct, what is happening in this all-important state.
And what is playing big there? Obviously, this week we have commented and reported on the interviews given by General John Kelly, the longest-standing chief of staff to Donald Trump, in which he suggested Donald Trump had both praised Hitler and met the definition of a fascist. Now, you worked for Donald Trump, of course. Did you ever hear him use language like that? And is that one of the reasons you've decided to now endorse Kamala Harris?
I didn't hear Donald talk specifically about Hitler, but his obsession with how Hitler ran his military, his obsession, his preoccupation with wanting the military to be completely loyal to him as opposed to loyal to the Constitution is at the very root of his obsession with Hitler. He even said, as reported by John Kelly, that he wanted generals just like Hitler. What he's saying is he wants total and absolute control over the men and women who have decided to serve in the military so that he can direct them to do whatever it is that he wants them to do, whether that is positive to advance this nation or for his own personal gain.
And he, John Kelly, has decided to speak out, he said, because of his concerns that Donald Trump might intend to use America's military against the enemy within. You know, effectively yes. American citizens. Now, do you share those concerns, which are extremely serious?
Oh, absolutely. We saw what happened on January the 6th. Donald Trump directed his crowd to come to Capitol Hill to take over, and we saw exactly how destructive that was. There will be more of that if Donald Trump is elected president. He has said that on day one, he will be a dictator. Donald Trump said it, and I believe it.
Well, Donald Trump will be history-making. So indeed will Kamala Harris if she wins as the first woman to be president. But in terms of Donald Trump, the first candidate of a major party to be a felon, for example, You know, given the baggage that comes with him, given that people can remember what happened on January the 6th, why is this not Kamala Harris's for the taking? What is she doing that limits her appeal to people?
Well, let's just keep into perspective that Donald Trump has been running for this office for 2, maybe 3 years. Kamala has only been running for just a few months. So certainly he has more of an advantage. He has had his messaging out there. He has built his apparatus. She's inherited Joe Biden's apparatus, his ground game, his generals. And so what she has to do is to make this race her own, to find a way in these short days to connect with the American voters, particularly those who are undecided and those swing voters in these key battleground states. It is an uphill battle for her, but it will be a photo finish. And I am very interested to see who Americans will choose to lead this country.
Yes, I think that's probably an understatement from you and the rest of us, to be honest with you. But in terms of abortion, it's one of the areas that Kamala Harris is strongest in. The fact that women of today have less rights than their mothers do in terms of losing that constitutional right. How much of this will depend upon getting the female vote out in America, and how much of a difference might that make?
Well, the key is getting the female voter out in key battleground states. Let's take, for instance, Arizona, which is certainly the most important state where this decision was made to overturn Roe v. Wade, and how you've seen the women come out who are most vocal. Arizona will also be key to deciding who becomes president. And you've heard from the women in Arizona. They are completely opposed to what's happening in their state. And if enough of them come out to vote, then it will be Kamala Harris who will be taking the Oval Office and not Donald Trump.
There are so many things to look out for. Very much looking forward to hearing more from you. Omarosa, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Israel has announced that a delegation, including the head of Mossad, will meet the CIA director and other negotiators in Doha this Sunday to try to restart ceasefire talks. Well, that confirmation came as a number of children were among at least 17 people killed in an Israeli airstrike on a school being used as a shelter. Today, Israel's military chief said there was a possibility for a sharp conclusion to the conflict with Hezbollah after 4 soldiers were killed in southern Lebanon. The IDF has also claimed 6 Al Jazeera journalists were members of Hamas. One of the accused men, Hossam Shabat, told Sky News that he was being targeted for reporting conditions in northern Gaza.
All the accusations are false and go against international law. The Israelis included me in this list because they are targeting journalists and influencers whose voices are being shared widely, particularly on the conditions in northern Gaza. I am not affiliated with any Palestinian militant group or wing. Me and my colleagues are independent journalists. We represent the voice of the people and work among civilians to cover the Israeli army's ongoing crimes. To be a journalist in this region means to say goodbye to your parents, your loved ones, and to carry your soul in the palm of your hands. Even though some of us are worried and afraid, we will not stop doing what we do. And that is what I told my mum the last time I spoke to her. She saw the accusations and called to say goodbye to me, her son who she hasn't seen since the beginning of this war. An entire year of being apart from my family, but as I've already told my followers online, we will not stop.
Well, our correspondent Adam Parsons is in Jerusalem tonight. And have the IDF, the Israeli military, Adam, given any proof to back up their allegations about those journalists?
Nothing that is verifiable independently. What they have done is provide copies of documents that they say were seized in Gaza, either in physical form or on computers. And they say these are effectively HR spreadsheets, lists of an enormous number of names of people affiliated with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, with details of their age, their date of birth, their address, phone numbers, but also military rank, their training, and even injuries they suffered. They say these 6 people are on those lists, and they say it is that affiliation that earns them the sobriquet of terrorists. All of these people deny that vehemently, as does Al Jazeera. They say that the Israeli military is effectively trying to stifle any independent journalism in Gaza, and that is a worry for them and should be for all journalists. And that is a fear that was backed up when I spoke to the Committee to Protect Journalists, an organisation that promotes press freedom, and their chief executive, Jodie Ginsberg.
Even if this document were credible, and we do not believe that it is credible, but even if it were credible, it does not prove or demonstrate that these individuals are currently active combatants, which is the only way in which it would be acceptable for them to be targeted in any way. And it's important to remember you have a number of journalists operating out of Israel, for example, who are former members of the IDF, former members of the military. Journalists are civilians and must never be targeted in a war, and to do so is a war crime.
Well, look north for us now, if you can, Adam, and this suggestion that there could be a sharp end to the war in Lebanon because the senior command of Hezbollah has been so decimated.
Yeah, this is right. This is a warning from the Chief of Staff of the IDF, so it is a hefty and significant intervention. And what he is saying is that there could be a pretty pronounced end to hostilities. That is because A, the IDF was well resourced, was well planned, but B, because the senior command of Hezbollah has effectively been ripped out. I think this is mirrored by the fact that, as you were saying, there are suggestions of progress in peace talks, that those will be continuing in Doha, that Mossad will be sending representatives, so will the CIA, the Prime Minister of Qatar will be the mediator there. Now, we were up in near that border with Lebanon yesterday, and even then there were suggestions that the IDF may have already finished pretty much most of its activities. The warning that we were picking up was this, that if they left, that what they would expect was that zone between the river and the border would remain free of Hezbollah military. The warning, they said to us, not in public, but certainly in private, was that if Hezbollah were to then return, then so would the IDF with even greater resolve.
Adam, updating us there from Jerusalem. Thank you. Now, President Putin has refused to comment on reports that North Korea has sent troops to Russia for possible deployment in his war on Ukraine. The Russian leader did, however, insist any deal to end the war must reflect the reality on the ground, while blaming NATO for escalating the conflict. Sky's Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett has this report.
These are the images that are making the West so concerned. Proof the US claims that North Korean troops are in Russia receiving training. They fear they'll join the fight against Ukraine. Kiev believes they already have in Russia's Kursk region to repel their incursion. 600 miles away in the city of Kazan, Vladimir Putin neither confirmed nor denied the reports, only citing an agreement with Pyongyang to help each other repel external aggression.
We've never doubted that the North Korean leadership takes our agreement seriously. But what we do and how we do things is our business within the framework of this article.
The Kremlin leader's just finished hosting the BRICS summit for emerging economies, where he's enjoyed holding court. Representatives from more than 30 countries were here. At one point, he even called for an end to the violence in the Middle East. But what about Ukraine? Putin says that's different. Apparently, NATO's at fault.
We told them not to do it. NATO expansion. But no, they did it anyway. Is this fair? There is no justice here. We want to change the situation, and we will achieve this.
Press conferences like this have been few and far between since the start of the war, with Vladimir Putin happy to take questions from members of the foreign media. And it's a sign of his confidence right now. He believes that as a result of this summit, the global majority is on his side. But not everyone here has been supportive, like the UN's Secretary General, who called for an end to the war.
We need peace in Ukraine, a just peace in line with UN Charter, international law and General Assembly resolutions.
For Vladimir Putin, though, this has been something to celebrate. seemingly making more friends than foes. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Kazan.
So let us show you those pictures once again of Los Angeles. We're expecting a district attorney to announce his decision today on whether to recommend resentencing on the Menendez brothers case. Lyle and Eric, 21 and 18 respectively at the time. They both shot their parents dead, arrested a year later, a case that was televised, or one of the first cases to be televised. The brothers never denied killing their parents at that time, although they had, but they said they acted in self-defense after enduring a lifetime of abuse by their father. And certainly the Los Angeles County District Attorney has said there is no question that a jury today would look at this case probably very differently than a jury did 35 years ago. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Martha Kellner, who's in Los Angeles for us. And, you know, now it would be looked at coercive control, mental and physical abuse by the parents, and sexual abuse by the father, Martha. So, you know, is there a case here, do you think, for the families who want to see the brothers freed?
Yeah, I think as a society, Anna, we have a much greater understanding now of the trauma inflicted on victims of sexual abuse and emotional abuse, as they allege that their father subjected them to. You can see there how packed that room is with family members, with media. This is a case that has fascinated this country for over 3 decades. And in fact, there's a lady on the front row towards the left-hand side. She has grey hair and she sat next to the lady with the blue dress. She is an aunt of the Menendez brothers. She's the sister of their mother, Kitty, and she has been very outspoken in her belief that the brothers should be freed. They've served over 30 years now in a high-security prison in Los Angeles. And this case has been the subject of many true crime dramas and podcasts, including the drama series Monsters, which is out on Netflix at the moment. So it's been in the public sort of cultural sphere for many years. The reason that we're now seeing these renewed calls for their release is because of 2 new pieces of information that have come to light, according to the lawyer for the brothers. One of those pieces of information is testimony from a boy band member. Their father, Jose, was an executive in the music industry. This boy band member claims that he too was sexually abused by Jose Menendez in the 1980s. There's also a letter that has come to light, which was written by one of the Menendez brothers to a cousin a year before the murder, which apparently alleges the abuse by their father. So those are the 2 key pieces of information. I expect what we'll see is the district attorney recommending resentencing in this case.
We'll look out for that. Martha, thank you. Well, let's return now to how Sky News will cover the race for the White House on election night. Our 12-hour results show will be presented from the heart of Washington. Mark Stone has had an exclusive sneak peek from our US Elections HQ.
I wanted to give you all a little glimpse into what you can expect here on Sky on America's election night. And such a huge night it will be too, as the country decides if they want Vice President Harris or former President Trump to lead them. Our 12-hour results show will come from here, our studio in the heart of Washington, D.C. This is NBC's Meet the Press studio, and it is ours on Tuesday, the 5th of November from 10 p.m. We'll have all the results, the analysis, and we'll try and explain what it means for America and for the world. Yalda Hakeem and Mark Austin will anchor the night with me, Lewis Goodall, and some special guests here in the studio. We'll have access to the most comprehensive exit polls and results from every state, county, and demographic across America, thanks to our partnership with NBC. And in an international broadcast exclusive, Sky News will have the fastest and most accurate race projections from the renowned NBC News decision desk. But of course, we'll have teams right across the country in the key swing states where this election will be won and lost. We'll be with the 2 candidates. Martha Kellner will be with the Harris campaign, and James Matthews will be with Team Trump. From 10 p.m. on Tuesday, the 5th of November, it is going to be a roller coaster. Join us here on Sky News.
Yes, and Mark Stone at the heart of it, of course. Do join us then for what will be rolling coverage on the 5th of November. Well, that's all for this programme this week. Yalda back on Monday. Sky News at 10 is next.